"You don't belong here. Go back to economy." Those were the words that sealed the fate of an entire flight crew. When Adrian Hayes, a man dressed in a faded hoodie and sweatpants, sat down in seat 1A, the head flight attendant didn't see a billionaire. She saw a target. She denied him water. She denied him his meal. And then she made the mistake of trying to have him arrested for theft when he ate a bag of peanuts. She thought she was protecting the airline's image. She didn't realize she was humiliating the man who had just bought the airline that morning. What happens when the person you're bullying signs your paycheck? You're about to find out in this brutal story of instant karma. The rain was hammering against the reinforced glass of JFK's Terminal 4, creating a grey, blurred curtain over the world outside. Inside, however, the air was conditioned to a crisp, sterile chill. Adrian Hayes adjusted the hood of his charcoal grey pullover. It was an old thing, frayed at the cuffs, with a small coffee stain near the hem that he hadn't bothered to wash out. To anyone glancing his way, he looked like a college student who had rolled out of bed too late for an 8 a.m. lecture, or perhaps a tired musician returning from a failed gig. He certainly didn't look like the man who had just spent the last 48 hours in a marathon negotiation session in a boardroom on Wall Street, finalizing the acquisition of a controlling stake in Stratos Global Airlines. He was exhausted. His eyes felt like they were packed with sand. All he wanted was to get on Flight 909 to London, recline the lie-flat seat in first class, and sleep for 7 hours until the wheels touched down at Heathrow. He walked toward the gate, clutching his boarding pass. The boarding process had just begun for Group 1. "First class and Diamond Medallion members, you are welcome to board," the gate agent announced. Adrian stepped into the priority lane. He was the first one there. Behind him, a line of suits, men in bespoke Italian tailoring, women with Louis Vuitton carry-ons, began to form. Adrian felt their eyes on his back. He was used to it. He preferred comfort over perception, especially when he was traveling alone. As he reached the scanner, the gate agent, a kind-faced woman named Beatrice, smiled. "Have a wonderful flight, Mr. Hayes. Seat 1A. "Thanks, Beatrice," Adrian mumbled, offering a tired smile. He walked down the jet bridge, the sound of his worn sneakers squeaking slightly on the metal floor. He reached the aircraft door and stepped inside. This was where the atmosphere shifted. Standing at the entrance to the cabin was the purser, the head flight attendant. Her name tag read Brenda Coburn. She was immaculate in her uniform, navy blue skirt suit, a silk scarf tied with geometric precision around her neck, and hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde perfection. Her makeup was heavy, particularly the red lipstick that seemed applied with a paintbrush. Brenda was greeting passengers, or rather, she was greeting certain passengers. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson," she cooed to the man behind Adrian, beaming a smile that showed all her teeth. Adrian stepped forward. He nodded at her. "Good evening." Brenda's eyes flicked to him. The smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer confusion, followed rapidly by disdain. She didn't speak. She didn't say, "Welcome." She simply looked at his hoodie, then down at his sweatpants, and then physically turned her body away from him to address the man behind him. "Right this way, sir," she said to the man in the suit, completely blocking Adrian's path for a second. Adrian paused. He wasn't in the mood for confrontation. He just wanted to sleep. He sidestepped her and turned left into the first-class cabin. It was a small, exclusive cabin with only 8 suites. He found 1A, tossed his duffel bag into the overhead bin, and collapsed into the wide leather seat. He pulled his headphones out of his pocket and closed his eyes, exhaling a long breath. A few minutes passed. The cabin filled up. There was the rustle of newspapers, the clinking of pre-flight champagne glasses. Adrian opened one eye. Across the aisle, in seat 1F, a man named Liam, a young tech entrepreneur type with flashy glasses, was already sipping a mimosa. The woman in 2A had a hot towel. Adrian realized he hadn't been offered anything. He sat up slightly. Brenda was moving through the cabin, holding a silver tray with crystal flutes of champagne and orange juice. She moved with practiced grace, leaning in to whisper politely to the passengers. She reached Liam. "Another top-up, sir?" "Please." Liam smiled. She poured the drink, bubbling and golden. Then she turned. She looked directly at Adrian. Their eyes locked. Adrian waited. He expected her to step forward, to offer him a drink, or at least a menu. Instead, Brenda turned on her heel and walked back toward the galley. Adrian blinked. Maybe she was out of glasses. He waited another 5 minutes. She returned with a fresh bottle, topped up the glass of a woman in 2F, and started to head back. "Excuse me," Adrian said. His voice was raspy from lack of sleep, but audible. Brenda stopped. She didn't turn fully. She just angled her head back, looking at him over her shoulder. "Yes?" "Could I get some water, please?" "No ice." Brenda stared at him for a beat too long. It wasn't a look of service. It was a look of appraisal. She sighed, a short, sharp puff of air through her nose. "We are currently serving the pre-flight welcome beverages, sir. The general water service begins after takeoff." Adrian frowned. "I see everyone else drinking champagne. I'm just asking for water. Those passengers are—" She paused, searching for a word, her eyes darting to his hoodie again. "Settled. I'll see what I can do once the cabin is secure." She walked away. Adrian sat back, baffled. He checked his ticket stub in his pocket. Seat 1A, first class. Paid in full. He wasn't an upgrade. He wasn't non-rev. He had paid $12,000 for this seat 3 days ago, before the acquisition was even public. He looked across the aisle. Liam, the guy in 1F, gave him a sympathetic cringe. "Rough start, huh?" Liam whispered. "Something like that," Adrian muttered. 10 minutes later, the boarding doors closed. The safety video played. Adrian was parched. His throat felt like sandpaper. He pressed the call button. A moment later, a younger flight attendant, a girl named Chloe, hurried over. She looked nervous. "Yes, sir. Can I help you?" "I just need some water," Adrian said. "Please." "Oh, of course." Chloe smiled instantly. "Still or sparkling?" "Still is fine." Chloe turned to head to the galley, but as she reached the curtain, she almost collided with Brenda. Adrian watched through the gap in the seats. Brenda grabbed Chloe's arm. She whispered something harsh, her face tight. Chloe looked back at Adrian, then down at the floor, nodding submissively. Brenda took the bottle of water from Chloe's hand and placed it back on the counter. She whispered something else, pointing a long, manicured finger at the economy curtain. Chloe came back to Adrian, empty-handed. Her face was flushed red. I'm so sorry, sir," she stammered, her voice trembling. We can't serve beverages right now. The pilot has ordered us to prepare for taxi immediately." "But you were just holding the bottle," Adrian said calmly. "It's policy," she whispered, looking terrified. "I'll bring it as soon as we reach altitude." She hurried away before he could argue. Adrian looked out the window as the plane began to push back. The engines whined to life. He wasn't angry yet. He was just observant. He knew how businesses ran. He knew that culture started from the top, but rot often festered in the middle management, and Brenda Coburn was clearly the rot. He didn't know it yet, but the water was just the beginning. The seatbelt sign pinged off about 20 minutes into the flight. The heavy curtain separating first class from the galley was swished shut. The smell of warming food began to waft through the cabin. Roast beef, truffles, garlic butter. It smelled incredible, and Adrian's stomach gave a painful growl. He hadn't eaten since a stale bagel at 5 a.m. He waited for the service to begin. Brenda and Chloe emerged from the galley with the meal cart. It was draped in white linen. This was Stratos Global's signature diamond service. They started at the back of the first-class cabin, row 2. Adrian listened as Brenda charmed the passengers. For you, Mrs. Gable, we have the lobster thermidor, or the Wagyu beef slider with caramelized onions. The Wagyu, please, the woman said. Excellent choice. And for you, sir. They moved up. They reached row 1. They reached Liam in 1F. Mr. Liam, Brenda purred. So good to see you again. We have the Wagyu, the lobster, or a delightful mushroom risotto today. Wagyu definitely, Liam said. Coming right up. Brenda placed the porcelain plate down, arranged the silverware, and poured him a glass of heavy red wine. Then she turned to Adrian. The cart was right there. The smell of the beef was intoxicating. Adrian sat up, unfolding his tray table in anticipation. Brenda looked at the tray table. Then she looked at Adrian. She didn't smile. She didn't offer the menu. We have the pasta, she said flatly. Adrian blinked. The pasta? The mushroom risotto. It's the vegetarian option. Adrian looked at Liam's plate, then back to Brenda. I heard you offer the Wagyu and the lobster to everyone else. I'd like the Wagyu, please. Brenda let out a short, patronizing laugh. It was loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. Sir, the premium proteins are reserved for our full-fare clientele. We have a limited loading of those meals. Adrian felt a heat rise up his neck. I am a full-fare clientele. I bought a first-class ticket. We prioritize based on status and ticket class. Brenda lied smoothly. Her voice took on that sugary sweet tone that is more insulting than a scream. Usually when passengers upgrade at the gate or use employee passes, the meal selection is not guaranteed. You get what's left. I didn't upgrade at the gate, Adrian said, his voice hardening. And I'm not an employee. I paid full price. Check your manifest. Brenda rolled her eyes. She actually rolled her eyes. She reached for a tablet strapped to the side of the cart. She tapped the screen aggressively with her nail. Click, click, click. Mr. Hayes in 1A, she read aloud. She stared at the screen for a moment. Her brow furrowed slightly, then she cleared it. It says here, unspecified fare class. Likely a system error usually associated with third-party discount sites. So, as I said, risotto. Or nothing. Adrian knew she was lying. He had booked directly through the corporate concierge. His fare class was likely flagged as VIP or executive, which sometimes appeared as a special code. A competent purser would know that. A malicious one would use it as an excuse. I'm allergic to mushrooms, Adrian lied. He wasn't, but he wanted to see how far she would go. Brenda shrugged. Then I can bring you a cheese plate from the economy snack selection. But that's all I can do. I have to save the premium meals for the intended guests. She looked pointedly at his hoodie again. The implication hung in the air like smoke. People dressed like you don't eat Wagyu. Liam across the aisle stopped eating. He lowered his fork. Hey, he said, leaning over. You can have my roll, and I think there's extra. I saw 3 more trays in the warmer when I went to the bathroom. Brenda snapped her head toward Liam. Sir, please enjoy your meal. Do not interfere with crew operations. It's a safety violation to exchange food across the aisle during service. Safety violation. It was such a blatant power trip that Liam actually laughed. You're kidding, right? I never kid about safety, Brenda hissed. She turned back to Adrian. Well, cheese plate, or are we done here? Adrian looked at her name tag again. Brenda Coburn. He memorized it. He memorized the shape of her face, the disdain in her eyes. "Fine," Adrian said quietly. "I'll take the cheese plate." Brenda smirked. It was a victory smirk. She felt she had put him in his place. Wise choice. She didn't serve him from the cart. She finished serving the rest of the cabin, disappeared into the galley, and returned 5 minutes later. She dropped a small, plastic-wrapped container on his tray table. It wasn't a first-class cheese board. It was the bistro box from economy. Processed cheese spread, a few crackers, and a pathetic bunch of grapes. "Enjoy," she said, turning her back on him. Adrian stared at the plastic box. He was hungry, so he opened it. He ate the crackers slowly. He wasn't going to cause a scene at 30,000 feet. Not yet. He needed Wi-Fi. He reached for his laptop bag. He needed to send an email to the board of directors. He needed to pull the employment file of Brenda Coburn. But as he pulled his laptop out, he knocked his water bottle, the one Chloe had finally snuck him earlier, off the tray. It fell onto the aisle carpet. Adrian unbuckled to reach for it. At that exact moment, Brenda was walking back down the aisle. She didn't see him bending over, or maybe she did. Her knee connected with his shoulder. It wasn't a hard hit, but she stumbled. "Oh my God!" she shrieked. The entire cabin froze. Brenda clutched her knee, hopping on one leg dramatically. "He tripped me! He just tripped me!" Adrian stood up, hands raised. "I was picking up my water. I didn't touch you." "You stuck your leg out," Brenda yelled, her face turning a shade of violet. "I saw you. You're upset about the food, so you try to assault a crew member." "Assault?" Adrian asked, incredulous. "Are you insane? I was reaching for this." He held up the water bottle. "Sit down!" Brenda screamed. She pointed a trembling finger at his face. "Sit down right now, or I will have the pilot restrain you. You are interfering with a flight crew. That is a federal offense, Mr. Hayes. Do you hear me? Federal." The other passengers were staring. Some looked terrified. Others, like Liam, looked suspicious of Brenda. "This is unbelievable," Liam said loud enough to be heard. He was just picking up water. "Stay out of this, 1F, Brenda snapped. She turned back to Adrian, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. She had him now. She had created a narrative. The scruffy man in the hoodie was violent. He was unruly. "I'm going to write you up," Brenda spat. "And when we land, the police will be waiting. You're not just not getting dinner, Mr. Hayes. You're going to jail." She spun around and marched toward the cockpit, ripping the curtain open. Adrian sat back down. His heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a cold, hard resolve. He opened his laptop. He connected to the onboard Wi-Fi. He didn't check his email. He logged into the Stratos Global Administrative mainframe. He had been given the master override codes just 4 hours ago. He typed in the search bar, "Personnel, Coburn, Brenda." He hit enter. The file loaded. Adrian Hayes cracked his knuckles. "Okay, Brenda," he whispered to the screen. "Let's see who you really are." The war had just begun. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted from uncomfortable to oppressive. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the jet engines and the occasional clink of silverware from passengers who were still allowed to eat. Adrian Hayes sat motionless in seat 1A. On his laptop screen, the personnel file of Brenda Coburn was a scrolling tapestry of red flags. Incident report, March 2019. Passenger complaint regarding verbal abuse. Status, dismissed, lack of evidence. Incident report, July 2021. Accusation of racial profiling. Status, settled internally. No disciplinary action. Performance review. 2023. Brenda manages the cabin with an iron fist. Efficiency is high, though warmth scores are low. Efficiency, Adrian muttered to himself. In the corporate world, That was often code for bullying. The curtain at the front of the cabin snapped open. The cockpit door had been accessed. A moment later, a man emerged. He was tall, grey-haired, wearing the 4 stripes of a captain on his shoulders. This was Captain Miller. He looked tired, the kind of weariness that comes from flying transatlantic routes for 30 years. Behind him, looking like a tearful martyr, was Brenda. She pointed a shaking finger at Adrian. "That's him, Captain. The one in 1A. He kicked me, and now he's on his computer, probably logging a fake complaint to cover his tracks." Captain Miller adjusted his cap and walked over to Adrian's seat. He didn't look angry, just exhausted and bureaucratic. He loomed over Adrian, blocking the light from the overhead bin. "Sir," Captain Miller said, his voice deep and authoritative, "I need you to close your laptop and look at me." Adrian slowly lowered the screen, but he didn't close it. He looked up, meeting the captain's gaze calmly. "Captain, is there a problem?" "Miss Coburn tells me there was a physical altercation," Miller said. "She claims you tripped her while she was performing safety duties." "I dropped my water bottle," Adrian explained, keeping his voice level. "I bent down to pick it up. She walked into me. It was an accident. If anything, she wasn't watching where she was going." "He's lying!" Brenda shrilled from behind the captain. "He's been hostile since he boarded. He demanded champagne before we were even catering, and he refused the meal I offered him." Adrian almost laughed. "Refused the meal? Captain," Adrian said, "I was denied the meal service offered to every other passenger. I was given a box of crackers, and I haven't raised my voice once. You have cameras in the galley, don't you? Or witnesses? Ask the gentleman in 1F. Captain Miller glanced at Liam in 1F. Liam sat up, ready to defend Adrian. "Captain, he's right. She's been riding him since—" "Sir, stay out of this." Miller cut him off sharply. He turned back to Adrian. "Look, I don't have time to conduct a forensic investigation at 35,000 feet. My job is the safety of this aircraft. My purser tells me she feels threatened. That is a level 1 security concern." Miller reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a yellow card. It was a terrifying document for any traveler. The notice of violation of federal law. He placed it on Adrian's tray table, right next to the pathetic plastic box of grapes. "This is a formal written warning," Miller said. "It states that you have interfered with a flight crew member. If there is one more incident, if you so much as look at Miss Coburn the wrong way or press that call button unnecessarily, I will divert this plane to Gander or Shannon, and you will be removed by federal police. Do I make myself clear?" Adrian looked at the yellow card. It was the ultimate insult. He was the owner of the airline. He signed the checks that paid for the fuel, the maintenance, and the captain's pension, and he was being threatened with arrest on his own property. He looked at Brenda. She was standing behind the captain, and for a split second, the mask slipped. She smiled. It was a tiny, cruel curling of her lips. She had won. She had weaponized the captain against him. Adrian took a deep breath. He realized that arguing now was pointless. The captain was acting on the information he had, however flawed. To win this, Adrian had to let them hang themselves completely. "I understand, Captain," Adrian said softly. "I will not speak to her again." "Good," Miller said. "Keep your head down. We have 6 hours left. Don't make them the longest 6 hours of your life." Miller turned and went back to the cockpit. Brenda lingered for a second. She leaned in, her voice a whisper that only Adrian could hear. "You should have flown economy, trash." She spun around and snapped the curtain shut. Adrian stared at the yellow warning card. He picked up his phone and took a high-resolution photo of it. Then he opened a new window on his laptop. He wasn't just looking at personnel files anymore. He was accessing the Stratos Global Legal and Compliance mainframe. He began to draft a new document. It wasn't an email. It was a board resolution for immediate executive action. He typed in the header, subject, termination of employment for cause, gross misconduct. Location, Flight 909. Time, 4:18 Zulu. He left the name of the employee blank. For now, he needed one more thing. He needed undeniable proof of theft or gross negligence. Rudeness was hard to fire someone for. Unions were strong. But theft? Lying to a captain? That was immediate termination. He put his headphones on, but he didn't play music. He turned on the active noise cancellation pass-through mode, amplifying the sounds around him. He could hear the chatter in the galley. He heard Brenda's voice. Scared the hell out of him. Did you see his face? He won't ask for water again. He heard Chloe's timid voice. Brenda, aren't you worried? What if he complains? Let him complain, Brenda laughed. Who's corporate going to believe? A diamond medallion purser with 20 years of service? Or some hoodie-wearing nobody in 1A? I'll flag his profile as intoxicated in the log. That invalidates any complaint he makes. Watch me. Adrian typed furiously. Log entry. Purser conspiring to falsify flight logs regarding passenger sobriety. He had the audio. He just needed the visual. He sat back. His stomach growled again. The cheese and crackers were gone. He was starving. And a starving billionaire is a dangerous thing. 4 hours passed. The cabin lights were dimmed to a soothing blue-violet hue. Most passengers were asleep, sprawled out in their lie-flat beds under plush duvets. Adrian hadn't slept. He had been working. He had mapped out the entire organizational chart of the in-flight service department. He found out who Brenda's regional manager was. He found out that Brenda's sister worked in HR, which explained why her previous complaints had disappeared. He was building a case not just against her, but against the system that protected her. But biology was catching up with him. His blood sugar was crashing. He knew the rules. On international flights, there was a sky pantry, a basket of snacks set up in the galley for first and business class passengers to help themselves between meals. It was standard service. He waited until he saw Chloe walk down the other aisle to answer a call light. The galley should be empty. Adrian unbuckled his seatbelt. He moved slowly, his socks silent on the carpet. He walked to the front galley. The curtain was slightly open. He peered inside. Brenda wasn't there. Adrian stepped in. The galley was dimly lit. On the counter, he saw the remnants of the first-class feast he had been denied. There was a half-eaten tray of lobster thermidor sitting near the sink, crew meal likely. And there, in a wicker basket, were the snacks, bags of kettle chips, dark chocolate bars, and silver packets of roasted almonds. Adrian reached out. His hand hovered over a packet of almonds. It was a $2 bag of nuts. He grabbed it. "Don't move." The voice came from the jump seat in the corner, shrouded in shadow. Adrian froze. Brenda was sitting there, legs crossed, reading a magazine. She had been watching him the whole time. She stood up slowly, a predatory grin spreading across her face. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew you were a thief." Adrian turned to face her, clutching the bag of almonds. "A thief? These are the complimentary snacks. They're for the passengers." "For paying passengers," Brenda corrected him, stepping into the light. "For passengers who behave. For passengers who aren't currently under a level 1 security warning." She snatched the bag of almonds out of his hand. "You are not authorized to be in this galley, Mr. Hayes. You are violating the captain's order to remain in your seat." "The captain didn't order me to starve," Adrian said, his patience finally fracturing. "I am hungry. You refuse to serve me a meal. I am taking a snack. That is not a crime." Taking company property without permission is theft, Brenda declared. She reached for the interphone, the handset on the wall that connected to the cockpit and the rest of the crew. "You're going to call the captain because I tried to eat some almonds?" Adrian asked, incredulous. "Do you have any idea how ridiculous you sound?" "It's not about the nuts," Brenda hissed, her face inches from his. "It's about compliance. You don't respect authority, and I'm going to make sure you learn a lesson." She pressed the button. "Captain, this is the purser. We have a situation." Adrian watched her. He didn't try to stop her. He simply memorized the time. 18:45 Zulu. "Yes, Captain," she said into the phone, her voice trembling with fake fear. "He entered the galley. He's aggressive. He was rummaging through the carts. I caught him stealing supplies. I don't feel safe. He's looming over me right now." Adrian took a step back, raising his hands to show the camera, if there was one, that he was not looming. Brenda hung up. She looked at Adrian with pure malice. "The captain is locking the cockpit door down completely. We are declaring a Code 3 due to a passenger disturbance. When we land in London, the airport police will be boarding the aircraft before anyone gets off. You're done." Adrian stared at her. This was it. She had crossed the line of no return. She had escalated a personal vendetta into a full-scale security incident. She was wasting police resources, delaying the flight disembarkation, and potentially traumatizing other passengers, all to satisfy her ego. "You realize," Adrian said quietly, "that once you declare a Code 3, there is a mandatory review of all flight deck audio and cabin logs? You just triggered an external investigation." Brenda laughed. "I write the logs, honey, and the captain backs me. You're just a guy in a hoodie. Nobody cares about you." She pointed to his seat. "Sit. Down. Now." Adrian turned and walked back to seat 1A. The cabin was waking up. The commotion had stirred people. Liam in 1F was awake, looking concerned. "Dude," Liam whispered. "What is going on? Did she just call the cops?" "She did," Adrian said, buckling his seatbelt. "For what?" "For trying to eat a bag of almonds." Liam shook his head. "That's insane. I'll testify for you, man. I recorded some of it on my phone. She's out of control." "Thank you, Liam," Adrian said. "But I don't think we'll need it." Adrian opened his laptop one last time. He had about an hour before landing. He needed to execute the final phase of his plan. He logged into the HR payroll system. He located the file for the entire crew of Flight 909. He saw the names: Purser, Brenda Coburn. Flight attendant, Chloe Evans. Flight attendant, Mark Davids. Captain, James Miller. He marked the file Brenda Coburn. Status, active. He moved his cursor to the status bar. He didn't change it yet. He wanted to do it face to face. He opened a new email window. He typed in the address of the chief operating officer of Stratos Global, a man named David Sterling. David was an old friend of Adrian's, and the man who currently thought he was running the airline until the acquisition paperwork was filed this morning. To D. Sterling, COO. From A. Hayes, CEO. Subject: urgent. Meet me at Heathrow Gate 42. David, I am currently on Flight 909, inbound to LHR. I have been assaulted, starved, and threatened with arrest by your purser, Ms. Coburn. Police have been called by the crew. Do not intervene with the police yet. Let them come. I want the full circus. However, bring the termination paperwork for the entire cabin crew, and bring my personal security detail. See you on the ground. Adrian." He hit send. The plane began its descent. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed. Brenda walked through the cabin one last time, doing her final checks. When she reached Adrian, she didn't check his belt. She simply leaned down and whispered, "I hope you like prison food. It's better than the risotto." Adrian looked out the window at the clouds breaking over London. He smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in 8 hours. "Brenda," he said, not looking at her. "What?" she snapped. "Make sure your uniform is pressed. You're going to be on the news tonight." Brenda frowned, confused for a second, then scoffed and walked away. She had no idea that the news wasn't going to be about an unruly passenger. It was going to be about the most public firing in aviation history. The landing gear dropped with a heavy thud. The runway approached. The Karma was about to hit, and it was going to hit harder than a 747 touching down on tarmac. The wheels of the massive aircraft kissed the tarmac at Heathrow with a violent shudder, followed by the roar of reverse thrusters. To most passengers, it was the sound of arrival. To Adrian Hayes, it was the sound of the cage door closing. The plane taxied for what felt like an eternity. The cabin remained dark, the mood somber. Usually upon landing, there is a collective sigh of relief. The sound of seatbelts clicking open, people rushing to grab bags. But not today. As the plane came to a halt at Gate 42, the fasten seatbelt sign did not turn off. Instead, the intercom crackled to life. It was Brenda's voice. She didn't sound like a service professional anymore. She sounded like a warden. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have a security situation that requires the authorities to board the aircraft. Do not stand up. Do not open the overhead bins. We appreciate your cooperation." A ripple of murmur went through the cabin. People were craning their necks. "Is it a bomb?" someone whispered in row 3. "No, it's that guy in 1A, someone else replied. "The one in the hoodie." Adrian sat perfectly still. He could feel the eyes of the entire first-class cabin boring into the back of his head. He looked out the window. Down on the tarmac, he saw the flashing blue lights of 2 police cruisers parked near the jet bridge stairs. The aircraft door opened. The cold, damp London air rushed in, mixing with the stale cabin air. Heavy boots thudded against the floorboards. 2 officers from the Metropolitan Police entered. They were imposing figures in high-visibility jackets, tasers on their belts. One was older, a sergeant named Graham, with a face carved from granite. The other was younger, Officer Price. Brenda was waiting for them. She stood with her arms crossed, pointing a manicured finger directly at Adrian. "That's him," she announced loudly, ensuring the business-class passengers behind the curtain could hear too. "Seat 1A. The unruly passenger. He's the one who assaulted me and attempted to steal from the bonded stores." Sergeant Graham nodded grimly. He walked down the aisle, his presence filling the small space. He stopped at Adrian's seat. "Sir," Graham said, his voice a low baritone, "I need you to unbuckle your seatbelt and stand up slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them." Adrian moved deliberately. He unbuckled the belt. Click. He stood up. He was taller than the sergeant, which seemed to surprise the officer for a moment. "Am I under arrest?" Adrian asked calmly. "You are being detained for questioning regarding an incident of air rage and theft," Graham said. "Turn around." Adrian turned. He felt the officer's hands patting him down, shoulders, waist, legs. It was a humiliation ritual. He was a billionaire, a man who reshaped industries, being frisked like a common criminal in front of 20 strangers. Across the aisle, Liam stood up. "Hey, this is ridiculous!" "Sit down, sir," Officer Price barked, his hand resting near his belt. "No, I won't sit down," Liam shouted, holding up his phone. "I have video. That flight attendant has been bullying him for 7 hours. She denied him food. This man didn't do anything but ask for water." "Sir, if you do not sit down, you will be detained for obstruction," Graham warned, not looking back. Adrian caught Liam's eye. He gave a small, imperceptible shake of his head. "Don't get involved, Liam. I've got this." Liam hesitated, then sank back into his seat, fuming. "Let's go," Graham said, gripping Adrian's arm. They began the walk. It was the longest walk of Adrian's life. He was marched down the aisle of first class. Brenda stood by the cockpit door, next to Captain Miller. As Adrian passed her, Brenda leaned in. She didn't whisper this time. She spoke clearly, a triumphant smirk plastered on her face. "Have a nice trip back to economy. In handcuffs." Adrian paused. He looked at Captain Miller. The captain looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Miller knew, deep down, that this was excessive, but he had chosen to protect his crew over a passenger. That was a fatal error in judgment. "Captain," Adrian said, "you're making a mistake. Get moving." The officer pushed him forward. They crossed the threshold of the aircraft. They walked up the jet bridge. The tunnel was cold and echoed with the sound of their footsteps. Adrian wasn't looking at the floor. He was looking ahead, toward the glass doors of the terminal. He was looking for a specific face. He knew that once he crossed those glass doors, the jurisdiction shifted. He was no longer in the sky. He was on the ground. And on the ground, Adrian Hayes was a god. The holding area at Gate 42 was a sterile expanse of grey carpet and uncomfortable metal chairs. The airline staff had cleared the immediate area, creating a makeshift interrogation zone. The police officers marched Adrian into the center of the waiting area. They didn't handcuff him yet, but they stood on either side of him, effectively boxing him in. Brenda and the rest of the crew, Chloe, Mark, and Captain Miller, followed them off the plane. They carried their luggage, looking like a victorious army returning from battle. Brenda was already on her phone, likely texting her friends about the drama. "Okay," Sergeant Graham said, pulling out a notebook. "Let's get statements. Captain?" Captain Miller stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. "Officer, the purser, Ms. Coburn, reported that the passenger was aggressive. He made physical contact, a kick, and was later found raiding the galley against crew orders." "Is this true?" Graham asked Brenda. Brenda stepped forward, breathless with performative outrage. "It's absolutely true, officer. He was hostile from the moment he boarded. He demanded upgrades he didn't pay for. When I refused, he tripped me. I have a bruise on my knee. And then, during a Code 3 lockdown, he tried to steal alcohol and nuts from the galley. I felt unsafe. I thought he was going to attack me." She wiped a non-existent tear from her eye. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. Graham turned to Adrian. "Sir, these are serious accusations. Assault on a crew member carries a prison sentence." Adrian stood silently. He wasn't looking at Graham. He was looking past the police, toward the far end of the terminal concourse. A group of men was approaching. It wasn't just airport security. It was a phalanx of 6 men in dark, tailored suits, moving with the synchronized urgency of a presidential detail. In the center of the formation was a man with silver hair and a sharp, terrifyingly expensive suit. It was David Sterling, the chief operating officer of Stratos Global Airlines. Brenda frowned, noticing Adrian's distracted gaze. She turned around to see what he was looking at. Her eyes widened. She recognized David Sterling. Everyone in the company knew who David Sterling was. He was the hatchet man, the guy who showed up to close hubs and fire executives. Why is the COO here? Brenda thought. Maybe he's here to congratulate me for handling a security threat. She straightened her scarf. Yes, that had to be it. The corporate office must have been alerted to the Code 3 and sent him to manage the PR. David Sterling didn't look at Brenda. He didn't look at the captain. He didn't look at the police. He walked straight up to the police line. "Officer," David said, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "Step away from that man." Sergeant Graham bristled. "Excuse me, sir," This is a police matter. Step back. It's not a police matter, David said calmly. It's a corporate misunderstanding. This man is a suspect in an assault, Graham insisted. David ignored him. He looked at Adrian. Mr. Hayes, David said, bowing his head slightly, a gesture of immense respect. I apologize for the delay, and for the reception. The silence that followed was absolute. Brenda's mouth fell open. Captain Miller took a half-step back. Adrian finally spoke. He brushed an invisible speck of dust off his hoodie. It's fine, David. Although, the service on this flight leaves something to be desired. David winced. I can imagine. Brenda stepped forward, her voice shrill with confusion. Mr. Sterling, sir? I'm Brenda Coburn, the purser. You shouldn't be talking to him. This man is a criminal. Be quiet, David said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The command was cold and absolute. He turned slowly to face her. You are speaking to Adrian Hayes. Brenda blinked. The name meant nothing to her. Who? David sighed, as if explaining quantum physics to a toddler. Adrian Hayes, the founder of Hayes Capital, and, as of 9 a.m. this morning, the majority shareholder and new owner of Stratus Global Airlines. The world seemed to stop spinning. Brenda looked at Adrian, the man in the hoodie, the man with the coffee stain, the man she had denied water, the man she had called trash. He owned the airline, he owned the plane, he owned her job. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like she might faint. Her knees, which she claimed were bruised, actually buckled, and she had to grab the back of a chair to stay upright. Captain Miller went pale. He took off his cap, his hands trembling. Mr. Hayes? We weren't informed of a VIP on board. Adrian stepped forward, breaking the police line. The officers, sensing the shift in power, didn't stop him. Adrian walked up to Brenda. He stood toe-to-toe with her. He was no longer the tired passenger. He was the shark in the water. You weren't informed because I didn't want you to be, Adrian said softly. I wanted to see how you treat people when you think no one of consequence is watching. And I saw. He turned to David. Did you bring the file? Yes, sir, David said. He signaled to one of his assistants, who opened a leather briefcase and handed Adrian a thick manila folder. Adrian took the folder. He weighed it in his hands. He looked at the police officers. Officers, Adrian said. I would like to file a counter-complaint. I have audio recordings of this employee conspiring to falsify federal flight logs. I also have witnesses to prove she filed a false police report. Sergeant Graham looked at Brenda. His expression shifted from professional to suspicious. Is that true, sir? It is, Adrian said, and we can play the tapes right now. He held up his phone. He pressed play on the recording from the galley. Brenda's voice, tinny but clear, rang out through the silent gate area. I'll flag his profile as intoxicated in the log. That invalidates any complaint he makes. Watch me. The recording ended. Sergeant Graham turned to Brenda. Ma'am, filing a false report is a criminal offense. I think we need to have a different conversation. Brenda was shaking. No, I was just... Adrian held up a hand. Wait, officer, before you take her away. I have some company business to conclude first. Adrian opened the manila folder. He pulled out a stack of documents. He uncapped a fountain pen. Brenda Coburn, Adrian said, his voice echoing in the terminal. For 20 years, you've been protected by a broken system. You've bullied passengers, abused your crew, and poisoned the culture of this airline. He looked around the gate area. A crowd had gathered. Passengers from the flight were watching. Liam was recording on his phone. David, Adrian said, do we have a PA system here at the desk? We do, sir. Good, Adrian said. "Turn it on. I want everyone in the terminal to hear this." The microphone at gate 42 squealed with feedback before settling into a hum. The entire terminal seemed to hold its breath. Passengers from other flights stopped rolling their suitcases. The police stood back, watching the scene unfold. Adrian Hayes held the mic. He looked at Brenda, who was now trembling so violently she had to lean against the check-in desk. He looked at Captain Miller, who was staring at his shoes, and then he looked at the crowd. "My name is Adrian Hayes," his voice boomed through the speakers. "I am the new owner of this airline, and today I experienced the reality of our diamond service." He turned to Brenda. "Brenda Coburn," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You represent everything that is wrong with this company. You judge based on appearance. You bully based on perceived status. And you lie to protect your ego." Adrian picked up a document from the folder David Sterling had handed him. He held it up. "This is your termination letter. It is effective immediately. You are fired for gross misconduct, harassment, and falsifying safety reports. Because this is a termination for cause, you will be stripped of your seniority benefits and your pension." Brenda let out a strangled sob. "My pension? You can't. I have 20 years. "You had 20 years, Adrian corrected. "You spent them building a legacy of cruelty. It ends today." He dropped the paper on the floor in front of her. He didn't hand it to her. She had to kneel to pick it up. Then Adrian turned to Captain Miller. The pilot looked up, sweat beading on his forehead. "Captain Miller," Adrian said, "you are a skilled pilot. But a captain is more than a driver. He is a leader. You allowed a bully to run your cabin. You threatened a passenger with arrest without investigating the truth. You chose convenience over integrity." Miller stammered. "Sir, I followed protocol." "You followed the path of least resistance," Adrian said, "and that makes you a liability. Your contract is also terminated. You will not fly for Stratus Global again." A gasp went through the crowd. Firing a senior captain on the spot was unheard of. Finally, Adrian looked at Chloe, the young flight attendant who had tried to sneak him water, the one Brenda had terrified, into submission. Chloe looked ready to faint from fear. "Chloe Evans," Adrian said softly. Chloe flinched. "Yes, sir." "You were the only one who remembered that I was a human being," Adrian said. "You tried to do your job despite the toxicity of your supervisor. That is leadership." Adrian smiled. "I am promoting you. Effective tomorrow, you are the new director of in-flight customer experience for the European division. You're going to retrain the entire staff, teach them how to treat people." Chloe burst into tears, covering her mouth with her hands. Liam, standing in the crowd, started clapping. Slowly, the applause spread. The passengers who had witnessed Brenda's tyranny began to cheer. But the karma wasn't finished yet. Sergeant Graham stepped forward. He placed a hand on Brenda's shoulder. "Brenda Coburn," he said, "based on the evidence provided by Mr. Hayes, you are under arrest for filing a false police report and wasting police time. You have the right to remain silent." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was louder than the applause. Click, click. Brenda was led away, weeping, dragging her feet, as she was marched past the very passengers she had sneered at for years. She looked at Adrian one last time, pleading with her eyes. But he had already turned his back. He was discussing the flight schedule with David Sterling. The king had returned to his throne. The court had been cleansed. The story didn't end at the airport. Liam's video of the confrontation went viral within hours, racking up 12 million views on Twitter and YouTube. The hashtag #ThePajamaBillionaire trended worldwide for 3 days. Stratos Global's stock initially dipped, but then surged as Adrian announced a complete overhaul of the company culture. He implemented a new policy. Respect is the only currency that matters. Brenda Coburn was charged and pleaded guilty to avoid jail time, receiving a hefty fine and community service. She was blacklisted from the aviation industry. Last anyone heard, she was working in a call center, where every one of her calls is recorded for quality assurance. Adrian Hayes still flies commercial, he still wears his hoodie, and he still sits in seat 1A. But now, when he asks for water, he gets it with a smile, not because he owns the plane, but because he reminded the world that you never know who you're talking to. What a satisfying ending. Adrian Hayes proved that true power doesn't need a uniform or a loud voice, it just needs the truth. Brenda learned the hard way that when you dig a grave for someone else, you'd better make sure you aren't standing on the edge. It's a powerful reminder to treat every single person with dignity, whether they're wearing a bespoke suit or a faded hoodie. You never know who holds the keys to your future. If you enjoyed this story of massive karma and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. What would you have done if you were Adrian? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.